Welcome back to the Energy IQ podcast, which brings together leading experts from the energy sector and beyond to explore a range of topics related to energy management, sustainability, and carbon reduction. My name is Eric Bloom, and I will be your host for today's session. I'm the Managing Director of Atlas Energy Intelligence, which is a research and consulting firm that helps a range of companies, including OEMs and utilities, to navigate the transition to a cleaner and more energy efficient economy. One of the constants we're seeing in this space is the role of innovative technologies and their ability to unlock the demand-side flexibility that's latent in buildings across the grid in ways that allow utilities to be greener and more reliable. I recently had the pleasure of working with the two partners that we're going to be discussing a new project with today, SensorSuite and Hilo Energie. And together we put together a white paper that goes in depth into a recent project they did in multi-unit residential buildings in Quebec. What I found particularly interesting about this collaboration is that it tackled one of the trickiest to address sectors for utilities, which is multi-unit residential buildings, and unlocked verifiable and measurable peak load reductions for them. To kick off our session today, I would like to welcome our two panelists. First off, we have Glen Spry, who is the CEO of SensorSuite, which is a Toronto-based company that provides AI-driven energy management solutions to multi-unit commercial and residential buildings, as well as small and medium-sized commercial and institutional buildings. Glen has a deep amount of experience in this space as a former energy utility executive, and he has extensive knowledge of distributed energy resource business models and has worked to accelerate the transition of our grid to a cleaner, greener, and more customer-centric environment. I'd also like to welcome Luc Fréchette, who is the Product and Operations Director with Hilo Energie. Luc has extensive product management experience in the tech and telco industries, and in his role with Hilo, he is focused on developing automated energy demand response solutions for multi-residential and commercial buildings. Welcome, Glen and Luc.
Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you, Eric.
So let's jump right into the discussion today, gentlemen. Before we talk about the contents of the white paper, it might be helpful to get a better sense of both SensorSuite and Hilo Energie. Let's start with you, Luc. Can you share a little bit more about Hilo Energie within Hydro-Québec? It's a unique relationship where you're a subsidiary within a big utility with a mandate to focus on a wide range of innovative technologies. But can you explain a little bit more about what the company's mandate is and how you're going about it?
Sure, and thanks for the opportunity, Eric. So of course, Hydro-Québec is no different than other utilities where they have to plan sufficient energy availability for the upcoming years. And already there are some challenges in Quebec with the peak hour consumption. So there are out there already a lot of complementary energy efficiency pricing and programs from Hydro-Québec. We come in as a turnkey automated solution for demand response needs, therefore eliminating on-site operations and providing predictability back to the utility. So currently we've developed a HVAC curtailment strategy applied through either hardware or software solution, exchanging with a local BMS or a partner platform, just like we did with the SensorSuite. So, and our solution will evolve to address energy consumption through different equipment in residential, multi-residential, and commercial buildings.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Luc. And Glen, could we just get a quick introduction on SensorSuite?
Yeah, sure. So SensorSuite's an energy IoT company where we target energy efficiency gains within the multi-unit residential building sector, and as you also mentioned earlier, in the commercial industrial space as well. We've been on a bit of a journey now for the last couple of years. I think we've certainly evolved from we'll call it a binary energy efficiency company. We've realized that the tool set that we have has capabilities far beyond just the basic energy efficiency gains within the building. As you mentioned earlier, my background is more in the utility space, understanding demand side programs, demand response programs. So when I first saw the platform, I very clearly saw a tool that we could use for energy efficiency as a core, but start to expand that into developing flexibility in these buildings, understanding how difficult that is for, well, the average entity to do. We really doubled down through COVID to produce as much flexibility and support the program that Hilo have kicked off over the time that we've been working with them.
Great. So as far as next question, let's get a little bit more into the problem that as a consortium you solved in Quebec and why it is important. I'll actually put it to you first, Luke, to discuss the real challenge in multi-unit residential buildings and the peak load issue in the Quebec context. And then Glen, you can provide any other color on that question as well that you might want to throw in as well.
Yeah, so as I mentioned a bit earlier, so with the challenge for Hydro-Quebec currently is being able to supply on peak hours, meaning mornings and evenings. There's already many initiatives in the market to address that, and we come in as an extra solution to this ongoing issue, and also mostly in the perspective that that's going to be growing in the future with transport electrification and other sectors that are be increasing energy demand. So we're really there to address currently the peak hours, and we are definitely having a automated approach to it, where we want to move the consumption ahead of the peak hours so that there's no consumption during that peak moment. And our solution is also part of a bigger plan for Hydro-Quebec, where they're going to be focusing on production investment and also energy efficiency programs. But we might have the ability to be introducing results in the market a bit faster and a bit cheaper in that sense. So we're part of a whole strategy and many different solutions that are going to be able to make sure that we give back energy to the utility and give good efficiency to them.
Mm. Yeah, it's actually one of the things. I'll just jump in there, Eric, because it's one of the big things that drew me to Andrew's Sensor Suite to the program was the fact that it is an automated approach. This is moving beyond the behavioral demand response programs that we see that are quite prevalent in most jurisdictions. We'll call it bitter experience. The behavioral world in DR is quite, it's notoriously unreliable. You often get a good spike early on in the demand response call, but they do tail off pretty quickly through those events. Our approach was really using the automated technology that we had. For us, the methodology that we use is that it's got to be imperceptible to the tenant, but provide tangible and valuable capacity to the grid. Where we, I think, took a different approach is we didn't really target commercial industrial loads, those large chunky loads that you see on grids. This is about bringing in an asset class that was otherwise unattainable to Hydro-Quebec and Hilo, that being multi-unit residential buildings. We took an approach of understanding that these buildings are basically giant thermal batteries, and if we can charge those up before those sort of times of peak grid consumption, we can coast a little bit through those time periods to provide that capacity back to Hilo.
Right, and it sounds like even if you shift that peak load just by a couple of hours, that can deliver a huge amount of value to the utility, and these new technologies are allowing you to do that in ways that you wouldn't have been able to in the past.
Yeah, well, definitely for us, that's the key objective, and Sensor Suite is really the enabler for us to make it happen. So by integrating together and make sure the communication is smooth and I'll say transparent for the end user, we're able to provide really like predictability back to the utility. So that's really bringing a lot of value back. And also we're able to have rewards handed back to the customers in the field.
So the value flows from the project back to the customer ultimately.
Yeah, for participating in this mission, if I can say.
Right.
Yes.
Great. Yeah. And then if you look at sort of demand response over the years, a lot of the sort of low-hanging fruit have been in the large commercial buildings or in residential buildings where you put a direct load control unit onto large air conditioners. And the multi-unit residential building has often been sort of a lower priority, has been forgotten. But as you see in the white paper, it represents a significant part of the building stock. And so as utilities sort of peel the onion here and look for other opportunities to reduce peak load and to deliver value from that flexibility, they're looking at those multi-unit residential buildings. So Glenn, maybe I'll put it to you to talk a little bit about why demand response in the multi-unit residential sector has been such a difficult nut to crack, and how you think SensorSuite was able to break through and to develop an innovative solution to address sort of a perennially challenging space for the grid.
Yeah, I think the basics of the situation is the building stock that we deal with is old. It's analog. It's pretty inefficient by rule. If we look at a typical building that SensorSuite has on the platform, it carries about 100 suites within the building, has a peak load of about 350 kilowatts. Now, again, our origins were deploying a sensor and control toolset within that building, monitoring real-time consumption, but also having real-time control to optimize the amount of energy consumed to deliver a building set point. So 21 degrees in Canada is what we have to achieve. We cannot go below that. So we modulate anywhere between 150 and 200 zones within that building to achieve that 21 degrees. I guess the fun part for us was realizing that, hang on a second, we've got 150 to 200 autonomous zones within this building. It has a control signal around temperature, but if you allow a little bit of latitude in that temperature threshold, all of a sudden you start to see some pretty big movements in building consumption. So as far as Luke, the team at Hilo and Hydro-Quebec are concerned, when we tune that building for a demand response event, there's 20 to 30% of the capacity of that building is clipped off completely. Now we do have to tune the building in order to get to to have enough thermal mass to last a decent amount of time, a tangible amount of time for the utility. But again, we wouldn't be able to do this if we weren't leveraging an already existing tool set. I look at this as almost a buy one, get one free. You've got the energy efficiency tool set. We're just repurposing now the toolbox, as it were, now to produce flexibility. And you mentioned it earlier, the low-hanging fruit for us is energy efficiency. The most valuable fruit and the most valuable resource that we can deliver is that demand response capacity for the grid. I mean, it unlocks a lot of opportunities for deployment of renewable energy in buildings. So not so much buildings, but on grids. So look, for us, it's really hard to get into these buildings. None of them are digital by nature. We have to go in and digitize them with the IoT toolset that we have, but the results are energy efficiency and demand side flexibility, which through this exercise we've been the first company in North America to be able to enlist a multifamily building into an automated demand response program, which is pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like your ability to aggregate all those small units using technology in a way that hadn't been done before is really what sort of sets this apart from previous approaches to demand response that might have been a little bit more individual unit focused.
Absolutely, and the beauty of the platform is because we have a portfolio approach for our energy efficiency. It's not just about aggregating individual suites; it's aggregating buildings on different parts of the grid to provide those services as well. So that's it's pretty innovative. Wish we'd had that tool set a couple of years back when I was down in New Zealand, but great to be a part of pushing this forward now.
Great, thanks a lot, Glenn. So in terms of the next question, I'll put it back to you, Luke. In terms of how you define and measure success for this project, how is Hilo approaching that? How are you defining success, and how do you see this sort of being multiplied going forward?
Well, actually, it's pretty simple actually for us. I mean, integrating with a platform like SensorSuite is kind of like ideal for us in the sense that it's much more scalable and time to market efficient, and therefore we will get into still like specific evaluation of energy potential originally of the building itself. Typically, they're going to be interesting upfront by the size of it. And then at the end, we're going to be comparing their typical baseline based on historical consumption and compare it to the actual curtailment results, where we're going to push a demand response queue to sensor suite. And then we're going to be able to compare the reduction of the consumption on the baseline. So basically, and typically the results are not too far off from the projections that we built up front. So it's quite simple actually for us.
Great, thanks so much, Luke. That's helpful. And for the last question for today's session, let's talk about how the learnings from this project could be applied to other utilities. Obviously, in this case, you've broken through in a very challenging sector. You also have a bit of a unique sort of story to tell here, because Hilo is a subsidiary of Hydro-Québec, whereas in many cases you have utilities who are working with third-party technology providers directly to do a lot of this work. So it seems like there were some unique elements to this project that helped make it a success. But that said, the technology exists now, it's been proven and can be applied in other cases. So I'd love to hear from both of you, actually. What advice would you have for others considering tackling a similar project within their utility territories? Where do they start? What are the keys to success for a successful implementation of a multi-unit residential building demand response program? I'll start with you, Glen.
Yeah, like our methodology, like I mentioned earlier, is simple. It has to be imperceptible to that tenant. We can't be turning the temperature up to 28 degrees and then turning it down to 10 degrees. So the first thing is making sure that you have a technical approach that really is seamless from the tenant point of view. The second piece here is, and Luke mentioned earlier, it has to be turnkey. Entities like ours have to be turning up with a proven market-ready solution. It can't be, hey, let's spend a couple of years trying to figure this out. From our side, you really do need to turn up, to sort of start how you mean to finish, right? The other thing for me is like the learnings that I guess we can take away from it are that from a technology point of view, we had to make sure that we could integrate into many various systems, like a cloud-to-cloud integration, API integration, something along those lines. We made sure that the platform was, a bit of a Swiss Army knife in that respect. We respect the fact that, Hilo and Hydro-Québec run their grid, run their system the way that they've chosen to. Lots of other jurisdictions do it completely different. So we have to be flexible enough to be able to integrate into lots of different programs, but still deliver those tangible results. I think if there's probably one parting shot in there, it's also understanding what kind of resources you have and the different sort of capabilities of the resources. Again, for Sensor Suite, that energy efficiency, that we've kind of banked that's table stakes now. But the demand side flexibility, it's not just demand response. We have to be very careful in choosing the right solution set for each utility's requirements. So in this instance, demand response is, it's about a 3 to 4 hour duration. Now, 3 to 4 hours is a long time when you turn stuff off in a building. So you got to condition that building, to last that length of time. But the reality is for us, that's actually not our sweet spot. We're a faster moving, more responsive tool set. For energy efficiency, we're making minute by minute runtime adjustments. Now, if we're doing that in real time, close as possible to it in that 1 minute time frame, we start getting into the areas of spinning reserves and really fast moving, more responsive capacity. Actually, we can deliver far greater capacity numbers because we're not having to worry about thermal degradation over longer periods of time. It's all short. So I think it's really understanding where you fit into that solution set for a utility for us, but recognizing that I'm sort of straddling two ends of the spectrum, the utility and the customer. And in terms of the utility, whatever I deliver in terms of capacity, it has to be verifiable, it has to be reliable. From a tenant point of view and a customer point of view, it has to be worth their time, number one. But number two, it has to happen behind the scenes.
Great, thanks, Glen. And then Luke, anything you'd add in terms of advice for other utilities or groups looking at multi-unit residential building demand response?
Well, our situation are quite similar with Sensor Suite in the sense that the ecosystem of that we will need to address is very fragmented. So we need to understand all the different opportunities and and requirements behind to be able to extract some energy efficiency, because basically, you know, a lot of buildings are unique and using different technologies and different equipment. So we're going to have to be very flexible, and we're going to have to be very focused on priorities and making sure that it's well sequenced in time to make sure that we provide the best return on investment for the utility, of course. So the challenge is to really be able to map out everything and make sure that you're prioritizing the right markets and find the right product fit for it, and really keeping focus on that, where it's really we're developing, you know, technology in-house, where it's going to be integrating with multi-partners, different platforms and different protocols and so on. So you really have to make sure the technology is going to be flexible and scalable in time. And making sure you understand like the key stakeholders in the market and partners that you're going to be needing to enable execution in the field and on premise. So definitely it's a complex environment, and really is to map out priorities, stakeholders, value chain, and make sure after that you're going to be focused on that.
Great, thanks so much, Luke. So that brings us to the conclusion of our Energy IQ podcast on the topic of grid intelligent buildings. I'm your moderator, Eric Bloom. I want to extend a big thank you to my guests today, Luke Fréchette from Hilo and SensorSuite CEO Glen Spry, for taking time to share their experience in implementing this really innovative project. This Grid Intelligent Buildings white paper that we've been discussing over the course of this webinar outlines a unique energy reduction solution to one of the trickiest to address sectors for utilities, multi-unit residential buildings. It's a great example of how innovative thinking and collaboration can unlock verifiable and measurable peak load reductions. So if you're an energy executive, a building management professional, or an energy investor and in this space, I think it's worth your time to read it. So if you've not already done so, I encourage you to visit sensorsuite.com and download the white paper for free by clicking on the link at the top of the website. And if you have more questions on the project, feel free to reach out to myself, Glen, or Luke at the contact details provided below. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks very much for having us.